Good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever and whenever you are. My name is Benjamin, and welcome to another GameMaker tutorial. Today we're going to be talking a little bit more about the GUI layer in GameMaker, and this is actually a small section from my book that where I show you guys how to do buttons on the GUI layer that you can click. Now, this can be a little tricky, and I'll show you why. First, though, I'm going to run an example to show you what we're going to be doing today. So you can see I've got this simple game here. I've got some grass in the background. I've got a character I can move around like this. And I've got this button right here on the GUI layer. Now that doesn't look super special. But one of the things about the GUI layer that's an advantage is the GUI layer can be a different resolution from your game. So this game right here has a resolution of 320 by 180, which is a really low resolution. My GUI layer has a resolution of 640 by 360. So that's a slightly higher resolution. So what does that allow me to do? Well, it just allows me to have the text that's drawn on the screen be a higher resolution than the actual game, so it can make the text look cleaner. It can make all the buttons on your GUI layer look cleaner. One of the other benefits of the GUI layer is that it is you don't have to, when you're drawing to the GUI layer, you don't have to draw specific to the view because it automatically draws it that way. There are some things that you'll have to take into account, and using the GUI layer is really easy unless you want to interact with something on the GUI layer, and then it gets a little trickier. This button right here, I can click on it. And you can see no matter where I move in the room, I can still click on this button and I can hover over it, and it creates this interaction with the GUI layer, and that's a little bit trickier. Now, I'm going to show you guys how to do this, but I'm not promising that this is the very best way optimized to do this. This is just a way to do this that works, and it works well, and there might be a better way, and if anybody knows a better way, I would love to hear it, because this is a little bit complicated for such a simple feature, but it's worth it because it is really nice to have this interaction with the objects on the, well, with something on the GUI layer. So that's what we're going to be doing today. Let's get started. Oh, and if you're interested in my book, there's a link in the description to my website. So I know this video is relevant to what's in my book and part of what's in my book. So if that's something you're interested in, check it out in the if I can talk, the description. So the first thing we're going to do is add a new object, and we're going to call this object display. Now this object is going to be in charge of updating and storing a couple global variables. So add a create event to this object and drag over a code block, and we're going to write some code here. Initialize the display object. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a variable that keeps track of the scale. So by default, well, in order to explain this better, let's first create our room. And we'll call this room test. Okay, we're going to give it a width of 640 and a height of 360. Now we're going to go into the views for this room, the views tab. We're going to select enable the use of views, visible when room starts, just for view 0. The view in the room is going to have a width of 640 is 320. Half of 640 is 320. And it's going to have a height of 180. Now you can see that our view in the room is going to be pretty small. But our port on the screen, which is going to be the size of the window on our screen, is going to be 640 by 360. So what that's going to do is it's going to scale the view in the room by 2. You can see that this is a scale factor of 2. It's going to scale it by 2 so that our game window isn't this big. This is a tiny game window. This is going to scale the view so that the game window is bigger. Now, let's go back to our display object. The GUI layer by default is the size of the port on the screen, the size of the display. So it's going to be 640 by 360. Now our view is only half that. So we need to keep track of that scale factor. Now you could just say that, oh, it's 2, but a better way of doing this is to create a variable called display scale and do display get GUI width divided by view WView, which stands for the width, view current. Now the reason this is a good thing to do is because no matter what we set the view width to, or the view port to, this is gonna give us that scale factor, which this is just gonna return 2, and we already know that it's a scale factor of 2. But you might have a situation where they're different numbers and you'll need a different scale factor to make sure that the rest of the math works. So this just helps generalize it for maybe other projects or other situations. Now we're going to create get the mouse position relative to the GUI, not the room. So that is not how you spell mouse. So when you get the mouse position in the room, for example, mouse X, this is relative to the room, and this is not relative to the GUI in any way. So if you were trying to use the mouse's X position to see if your mouse was hovering over a button on the GUI, it wouldn't work because your GUI is different from the actual room, right? If you draw something at position 32, on the GUI layer, you could move around in the room, and that could be drawn at 32 by 32, which will be up in the left-hand corner of the GUI layer, of your screen. But relative to the room, that number could be anything. It could be, it could be 300 by 300 at position 300. So we can't use mouse X to compare to the coordinates on the GUI. We have to create our own variable for that. So we're going to create one called global.GUI mouse X and global.GUI mouse Y. Now there may be a way to get the mouse's position relative to the GUI. I don't know it. You can do display mouse get X, but this is relative to your actual monitor display, and so if they don't have the game in full screen, that won't work. In fact, I don't even know if it'll work in full screen. I haven't tested it, so we're just going to create our own. Well, it won't work for this situation. It works fine for what it's supposed to do, but not for this situation. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get the mouse's position, mouse X, minus the view's position. View X view. Okay, view current. So what this does is it gets, if we've moved the view, then it doesn't matter. Our GUI mouse X position is still going to be relative to kind of the screen and not actual. I'm trying to think of a good way to explain this. So when we subtract the view's X position from the mouse's X position, we get the mouse's X position relative to the view. That's the best way of explaining it. We now have the mouse's X position relative to the view. And so no matter where the view is in the room, if the view is moving, it doesn't matter. The mouse position is going to be the same because it's now kind of attached to the view, relative to the view. But we know that our GUI layer is not the same as the view still. We have to factor in the scale. So we need to multiply this by the global dot display scale. Now we have a mouse position that is relative to the GUI layer. So no matter where we are in the room, this is going to be relative to the GUI layer. And we need to, I'm just going to copy this right here for the Y position and change this to mouse Y view underscore Y view, and we don't need to change the display scale. Now if your game's not going to have the same aspect ratio, you'll need to have a display X scale and a display Y scale because your X scale and your Y scale might not be the same. But in this example, I'm just doing it so they are the same. I'm planning on not ever changing the aspect ratio. So now what we're going to do is, well, come back into your create event and just copy this code right here where we create those variables and create a step event and an end step event. And we're just going to update the mouse GUI position. So, and then we'll just paste that same code in here. We just need to make sure that we're updating these variables in the end step event so that it's ready for us to draw them when we do. So go into our room and create the object, the display object. Now we need to create our button. So create, click this little object right here to create a new object. And let's see, we're going to call this object GUI button. Add a create event and drag over a new code. And I'm going to just maximize this. So initialize the button. We're going to do a text for it, just so, I mean, these are things that you guys can change later. Click me. That's very tempting. I'm going to give it a width equal to 96, a height equal to 28, and a hover variable equal to false. We're going to use this hover variable to tell whether or not the mouse is over it. Now our button needs its own X and Y coordinate that are going to be relative to the view. Now I'm only doing this because this allows you to place the object in the game room and use that to help position it on the GUI layer. And that just can make it quicker when you're trying to put things on your GUI layer. You can put them in the game room to get the correct position you need. So we're going to call this display underscore X and display underscore Y. And the first one's going to be equal to x start, which is just your start position in the room, times global dot display scale, because we need to make sure that if this is going to be our x position relative to the GUI, we need to convert this x start position into a GUI x start position, basically. So that's why we're timesing it by this scale. So this is going to be y start. There we go. And display y. Okay, we're done with the create event. Now we're going to add a step event. Now this is the this is the code that is fancy, kind of. It's kind of a little complicated, so if you don't understand it, I'll try and do my best to explain it. Check to see if the mouse is above us. You could do this with a whole bunch of if statements, like if global dot GUI mouse x is greater than display x minus width divided by 2, and if it's less than display x plus width divided by 2, and you can do this whole huge long if statement to check all of these cases. There's a slightly easier way to do it, and I'm going to show you how. We just do var x hover equals parentheses global dot. Believe me, this is still going to be long, but it's going to be shorter. Global dot GUI mouse x equals. So this is actually a Boolean variable, a Boolean value, because we're checking to see if this value right here is equal to some other value over here, and it's going to return either true or false. Median. So the median function, you can pass it as many arguments as you need to, and it returns the one in the middle. Display x minus width divided by 2, comma, global dot GUI mouse x, comma, display x plus width divided by 2. Okay. Now copy this whole thing right here, which is a big statement, and change it to y hover and mouse y, display y minus height, mouse y and display y and height. Okay. Now we can do hover equals x hover and y hover. So if both of these cases are true, if we're hovering both on the vertical, or the horizontal, the x coordinate and the y coordinate, then our hover variable can be set to true. Now that's a little complicated, right? But basically, if the return value of the median is equal to the mouse's x position, if the mouse's GUI x position is equal to 0, then the lowest value we can ever get to is over here in this median, is the button's left edge, which is not going to be 0, so then they won't equal each other. But if the mouse's x position is the very edge of the button, then this is going to equal it. They're going to equal each other. If the mouse is in the middle of these two edges right here, right, then it's just going to return this value, and so they're going to be equal to each other. So it's a little complicated, but if you think it through, I think you'll be able to figure it out. It's really useful to use the median to test if you're hovering over something, especially in this case. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go and we're going to create mouse global mouse left pressed. And then we're going to do if hover show message. You clicked the button on the GUI. There we go. That's just proof that it only works when we're actually over it. And now we're going to add a draw event. And I'm actually running out of time here. We're going to draw this to the GUI layer, obviously a draw GUI event. And we're going to say draw the GUI button if, well, yeah, whatever. If hover else. I'm just using this draw set alpha to change the alpha value of the button depending on whether we're hovering over it. Draw set alpha 0.5. Draw rectangle display x minus width divided by 2 display y minus height divided by 2 display x plus width divided by 2 display y plus height divided by 2 false. Display I typed that without looking, so hopefully I didn't get any typos I didn't notice. Draw set alpha, let's set the alpha back to 1. Draw set h align fa center. This is just setting the horizontal and vertical alignment for the font. Draw set v align fa middle, just so that it fits in the button better. Draw text color display x display y text c white oops c white and 1. Okay, that's all, just nothing too fancy here. We're just drawing the rectangle based on our width and height and our current position. Now let's actually put that guy in the room. Objects. I'm just going to put it over here on the right hand side. Go to the views so you can see where it's going to be relative to the view. You can see here, let's put it kind of up in the top corner like this. Okay, let's save and run the game, and I might have typos, so we'll see. Display get GUI width in object display create event. What did I do wrong there? Display get GUI width. Oh, you need parentheses after that function. This is a function call, it's not a variable, so you need parentheses after it. Let's run this again. Okay, now we've got our button. It's on the GUI layer. We can hover over it and we can click on it. In my other example, I created the character to prove that you could move around in the view and this will still work. I'm not going to do that in this example because you can create your own character and move the view to test it yourself, but I do know that the code works because I tested it in my other example. But this is a way, this is a way, if you keep track of the mouse's position relative to the view, then you can use this cool little trick to see if you're actually hovering over a certain object on the GUI layer, and you can use that to interact with buttons on the GUI layer and press those buttons. This tutorial has been a little bit more complicated than my normal tutorials. I want to switch it up every once in a while. I want to do simple tutorials and then sometimes slightly more complicated ones. That's kind of what I'm trying to do in my book as well, to hit kind of a broad audience. And here pretty soon I've got I've got a nice networking example ready. So I was going to do that today, but I'm short on time, so I did this one instead. Maybe next Tuesday I'll be uploading the networking example. It's not it's not too fancy, but I tried to simplify it as much as I could because networking can be complicated and I want you guys to have a good video tutorial that's simple where you can get the basics, and then I can build on it and make it more complicated later so you can, learn more. But I want to get the basics kind of pounded in first. So anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Be sure and like, favorite, and subscribe. Share this video on Twitter. That helps me a lot when you guys share my videos on Twitter. If the video helped you, then it very well might help someone else. And that's what I'm here for, is to try and help you guys out. So thanks again, and I will talk to you guys later.